Now I am. The December 20th meeting of the PZA committee. Are you listening, George? To order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Present.
Mr. Tripp. Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Tholen. Ms. Polk. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Einfeld. Mr. Payton.
Present.
Ms. Peters. Mr. Ritter.
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Present.
Mr. Fairfield.
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll go now to public comment, and just for your information, we have no application for zoning on a solar farm. And when that takes place, there will be public hearings and where information can be gathered and people can make comment at that time. We will have public comment, and I have 7 of them. We allow 15 minutes, so about 2 minutes, and I'll hit the gavel and to keep it moving, if that's understood, okay? And I will go through them in the order they've been received. So, Judge Wenzelman, you are the first.
Good morning. Am I on?
I've got you on.
Good morning.
There you go.
Darren? Okay. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I will be brief because I got the next meeting, and so we want to get this one done as quickly as possible. We're here, myself and many of my neighbors, and this is just a small contingent of the people that have joined together to start to discuss this issue. We've had sent to us a proposal. It hasn't been filed in your offices, I realize that, but it is massive. 430 acres. We live out in a rural community. To have something like that be plopped in the middle of us is going to completely change the character of the community in which we live. We have concerns that even though I know you have an ordinance in place, the fact that they propose something that they feel emboldened enough to include placement of solar panels that would almost circle over half of the residents right outside their residence, there's something wrong with the ordinance. Something needs to be looked at. I mean, we are residents that have been out here for years, basically providing a tax base to the county. We feel that we need your protection to look after our interests. We realize you have an ordinance, so there's a process. I understand that. But the thing is that this has put the monkey on our back right away to start congregating, hiring a counsel, an attorney, and start being prepared to go through the process when we think there's some major flaws in this. We have some concerns about the fact that it's going to have an impact on the valuation of our property. When all of a sudden you've got 430 acres that changes from open area to basically fence and glass panels and structures, you're basically taking our rural setting and converting it over into a commercial, industrial type of setting. And that causes us great concern. I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Judge. I really wanted to gavel you down, but... Okay, Ron Lemke, please. There we are.
Actually, I'm used to talking to groups. I probably don't need my.
We do because it's being recorded. Okay.
Hi, my name's Ron Lemke. Ladies, gentlemen of the board, thank you for listening to us today. To add to Judge Wenzelman's comments, I think there's a lot better places that we can put these solar farms. I'm not against solar power and renewable energy, but we've got all kinds of brownfield areas around the county. I'll point out the old Roper plant. I'll point out the old Gould battery plant. We've got commercial properties, Walmart, Northfield Square Mall. Why don't we look at putting these solar farms on those roofs? Maybe even over the parking lots. They do that a lot in Europe. They put solar farms over parking lots. You can't use the land for anything else. And the people who park there get to park in the shade or out of the rain in bad weather. Instead of converting valuable farmland over to these solar panels, and it's a 40-year lease, it's going to completely destroy the soil quality underneath these solar farms because all they're spraying is herbicides on them to keep the weeds down. in 40 years, if they rip the panels out, and I have concerns that they'll actually rip the panels out in 40 years, that soil is not going to be worth anything. You can't farm on it again. You've now destroyed it. Now it's a brownfield area we're living in. So those are my concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is it Jerry? Okay. What's your last name? Okay. You're up.
Hello, I'm Jerry Rafe, and I'm one of the owners of Precision Piping. And I live in this area where the solar panels are going to be adjacent to our property. And one of the reasons that we moved out there was to get away from being in the city and the hustle and bustle. And I sent a letter to all the board members, and I emailed them to you. That's on a personal level, and I realize that the personal level normally isn't what's in play here, you know, and I understand about the county needing a revenue stream. But you have to take the personal side of it into account, because from going from what Ken said, he did it very eloquently, from what we have now to what it's going to be, it's just scaring all of us to death, or we wouldn't be here, that's for sure. So I'll cut it short, but that's basically this side of it, is the personal side of it. That's why I wanted to get it to you, and hopefully you take the time to read the letter that I sent you to understand that it's a total package. It's not just about, you know, getting a revenue stream for the county or all the things that Ken mentioned and Mr. Lemke mentioned. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for being brief. Kimberly Bashan.
Hi, I'm Kim Basham, and I have a lot of concerns myself. I have children out there. I'm worried about well water, drinking it. I mean, I don't know all the harmful side effects yet. I don't really think all of us do. You know, there's always talk that everything's always safe, but then something happens and next thing you know, we have a problem. I'm thinking maybe if we're gonna do this, maybe we should get city water. You know, I don't wanna take a chance of getting carcinogens from runoff from the rain and all of that type of stuff. And also, I would like to mention that article I passed up to you. This isn't only going on out in Salina Township. This is a big deal. This is going on out in Mazan right now, Grundy County, and they're fighting it right out there too. And they're dealing with the same solar panel company that we're gonna be dealing with, Cypress Creek, and they're already talking about broken promises that they're not fulfilling. So definitely don't want a company that's not gonna stand by their word and do what they're going to promise they're gonna do. So
Okay.
that's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you for being brief. Christine Brinkman.
Hello, I'm Christine Brinkman. Pretty much in agreement with everything they're saying. I really don't have much to add to it because they've pretty much said everything for me. So, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my parents who couldn't be here today, Charles and Carolyn Brinkman. But I am in agreement with everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sally Peters.
My name is Sally Peters. We just moved out to Bonfield just almost just 1 year ago, and we have 2 crude oil pipelines that go through our property and probably some of our neighbors. We have a huge electric, I don't know, they're massive electric things next to our property that go through. We have a nuclear plant that's not too far as the crow flies away from us in Bonfield. We don't really need, or do we need, solar energy also out there? We're energied enough, and we just don't think this area is, we just don't need one more thing. Let's put it that way. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Tanya Wenzelman.
Hello. Hello, my name is Ira Curley.
What is your name?
Ira Curley. IRACURLEY.
Okay.
Okay, my concern is basically safety issue and concerns. One of the things that I'm very concerned with is when these panels are put together, what is the wind rating on these? Once
Could
it
you
goes in?
get a little closer to the mic or raise
Okay.
it up a little bit?
Wind rating.
Thank you.
What is the wind rating? How many miles an hour of wind can this withstand? We get high winds out there, and once it comes to resonant frequency, will these panels dislodge and become missiles? The other thing is tornadoes. Tornadoes would come very close through there. They will become projectiles. Glass that's used on them, they're gonna, just a strong concern. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. I must compliment you folks on your briefness. I don't know if we've ever had anyone speak before us that have been that succinct and brief, so we appreciate it very much because we have a long meeting today. Judge.
I invite anyone to come out. Any one of us will give you a tour of what it will look like out in our residence. You can't comprehend it unless you actually come out and drive the road. And the invitation is to come out, give me a call, we'll make arrangements to give many of you a tour around the area as necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Going on, you've received the minutes of May, June, August, September, October, and November of 2016 and October of 1918. George, did I say 1918? 2018. 2017.
You were the only one.
George, you have a comment to make, or are you making a motion? Motion to approve. Second? Mr. Stauffenberg. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Going on to the building report. Bill.
All right, in your packet, hit number 3. All right, in your packet, you have the building reports for both October 2017 and November 2017. In October, we had 2 new homes valued at just over $1 million. Total permits were 79, with a total value just over $3 million. And we collected $26,414 in building permit fees. For November, we had 3 new homes with a value of $798,000. We issued 43 permits total with a value of $1.4 million. And we collected a total fees of $14,045.
Any questions? Ms. Peters?
I make the motion to combine and approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. Multiple seconds. Polk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Stormwater, MS4 program
Yes.
discussion.
As a requirement of our MS4 program, we have this on the agenda every month to ask if there are any stormwater or MS4 issues that need to be discussed. If not, we can move on.
Okay. Moving on to zoning. ZBA case 17-07, request for rezoning from A1 Agriculture District to A2 Agricultural Estate District on a parcel generally situated in Section 25 of Yellowhead Township. The petitioner is Gary A. Haas, property owner and applicant.
Diane, could you?
What should have?
Solar. Mr. Haas owns a 26-acre parcel in Yellowhead Township, just between Minnemaness Golf Course and Sherburneville. He would like to divide that property and rezone the western 250 feet to A2 Agricultural Estate for a home site. It's currently zoned A1 Agriculture. The eastern portion of the property would remain in row crops and agriculture and would not be eligible for a building permit since it would be less than 20 acres. the wooded area. Let's see what the acreage is on that. 9.9 acres of woods would be eligible for a building permit for one home if the zoning were to be approved. Zoning board had a hearing Monday night and agreed with the findings of fact and voted 5-0 to approve this rezoning.
Any questions? Motion to approve. Pardon? Second? Oh, you have a question. I need it. Let's have we've got a motion and we need a second. Mr. Mulcahy for the second. Now, Ms. Peters.
Okay, couldn't he just build the house on the parcel without the rezoning? It's 26 acres.
Well, he's not building the house for himself. He wants it to be a buildable lot so he can sell it. Currently on the 26 acres as is, he can have one house now. The end result after the rezoning, still can have one house on the 9-acre parcel. The remainder would have to remain in farm uses.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. ZBA case 1708, request for special use permit to section 121-99 C3 automobile wrecking yard and junkyard, a variance to section 121-99 C3 fence in the A1 agriculture district on a parcel generally situated in section 4 of Limestone Township. The petitioner is BSF Properties LLC, property owner and applicant.
Okay. BSF LLC is requesting a special use permit to operate an automobile wrecking yard / junkyard on a 10.72 acre parcel on 1000 South Road in Limestone Township. The site has been used as an automobile salvage yard for at least 40 years. There was some testimony that it could have been as long as 50 or 60 years. Nobody really knows for sure, but it predates our zoning ordinance. The special use permit, since it never had a special use permit because it predated our ordinance, and they would like to make everything legal and be allowed to make some improvements to the site, such as a scale and a new building for non-ferrous metals. They are requesting a special use permit, which will make it compliant with our zoning ordinance. They are also requesting a variance on fencing. Our ordinance requires a 12-foot tall solid fence around the entire perimeter of any scrap yard or salvage yard. And the arguments here are that the site is surrounded by heavy woods on 3 sides, and it really does not make sense to require a fence on all 3 of those sides. So that is what the variance is. There would still be a fence on the south side where the road is, and that would be a solid 12-foot fence. The zoning board heard the testimony on Monday night and voted 5-0 to approve both the special use permit and the variance request. Just on a side note, the BSF owns the property to the west, so they do have control over the trees on that site, and they own about 70 feet worth of the trees on the north side, so they do have control over those. They do not have control over the trees on the east side. Zoning board did put a condition on the recommended approval that in the event that those trees were no longer there, that BSF would put a fence along the eastern side of the property.
Is there a motion by Mr. Kinzinger and seconded by Mr. Washington? Any discussion? Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we put the same clause in for the north side of the property also, if the woods were no longer there? Because there's woods there also?
You could expand the condition to the entire perimeter if you'd like. That is entirely up to this committee.
Would
you like to amend the motion to that effect?
Yeah, I would like to propose that
okay,
amendment.
that the whole perimeter, if the woods are removed, that the
Right, 'cause
12-foot fence would be
also,
there.
if they sold it on the west side, so, yeah. And that way
Okay.
we're covered.
So it'd be the total perimeter.
They could do each side individual if it,
No, right,
okay,
but the.
three parts.
The requirement would apply to the entire perimeter.
Right. Is there a second to that amendment by Mr. Ritter? Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor to the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now to the original amendment for approval, motion for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. ZBA case 17-9, request for a variance to section 121-281, B2, accessory structure setback in the A1 agriculture district on a parcel generally situated in section 12 of Yellowhead Township. The petitioner are Ambrose and Shirley Marcotte, property owners and applicant.
Okay, this case is fairly straightforward. At issue here is a farmstead that they testified was created about 80 years ago. And since that time, various buildings have been constructed on the site. Some of them before zoning even existed in this county, and therefore no requirements of where you can put your buildings. The owners wish to sell off the farmstead and have applied for and received a farmstead exemption on the area you see outlined in red on the map up there. Part of the requirements of the farmstead exemption is that the property must meet all requirements of the zoning ordinance, including setbacks. When they did their site survey for the farmstead exemption, it was revealed that there's a garage that the arrow points to there that is only 3.2 feet from the eastern property line, and our requirement is that all accessory structures be a minimum of 5 feet from the property line. So they are requesting a variance to allow that garage to stay in the location that it is and be eligible for permits and reconstruction if necessary. If the variance is denied, the garage would be allowed to stay there for as long as it stands, would not be eligible for permits, and if rebuilt, would have to be built to meet the 5-foot setback requirement. Zoning board voted 5-0 to recommend the approval of this variance.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Mulcahy, is there a second? Mr. Payton, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. ZBA case 17-10, request for rezoning from A1 Agriculture District to A2 Agricultural Estates District on a partially generally situated in Section 8 of Salina Township. The petitioners are Ryan and Ashley Romero, Brian Stevenson, and Clyde W. Davis, property owners and applicants.
Yes. The Romeros own the parcel on the left. The one in the middle is owned by Mr. Stevenson, and Mr. Davis owns the one on the corner over on the right. These three properties were created at various stages around the year 2000, and I did put together a map which is very complicated to read that showed the progression of divisions within the area. All three homes, through some very creative dividing of property, were permitted and built on large acreage, which allowed them to be permitted. And sometime around in the year 2000, 1999, they got divided into these smaller parcels, sold off, and do no longer meet our zoning requirements. As you know, the A1 district, which these are zoned, requires a minimum of 20 acres for a home. They are no longer 20 acres and therefore are not compliant with our zoning ordinance. It should be noted that the current owners are not the original owners that created this issue. Because of that, the three homes are not eligible for any permits or improvements through our office until this is corrected, and that is what they are asking to do at this time, is to allow these three parcels to be rezoned to A2 Agricultural Estate, to bring them into compliance with our zoning ordinance, and to make them eligible for permits, reconstruction in the case of disaster, or improvements as the owners see fit. Zoning Board of Appeals heard this case Monday night and voted to recommend approval 4-1. The nay vote did not offer a reason for their vote. I do believe there was some confusion because he kept asking if we've heard this case before, and I told him that no, we've heard similar cases, but not on these properties. And he, for whatever reason, still voted no.
Is there a motion to approve? By Mr. Ritter, second. By Mr. Wheeler. All right, discussion. Any questions? Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm requesting a little history.
Microphone.
I'm requesting a little history. It seems like they started right, they got sold, and now they have a problem. Do we have something in place to stop this from proceeding forward?
Yes, and yes, we do. There was a period of time that somebody got the idea that they could circumvent our ordinance by getting the permit on a 20-acre parcel, and then after the house was built, sell off all but 5 acres, keep the 5 acres, and sell the remaining acreage back to the original owner. In fact, we have, I don't believe it's these parcels, but this occurred on several parcels throughout the county during that time, all from the same person. Since that time, there are things in place that would help prevent this from happening, but those all divisions of property are now reviewed by our plat officer, which is me, before they can be recorded and must be approved. So that helps. So they wouldn't necessarily get away with that. I know not on this property, but on some properties, fact was the deed for the 5 acres and the deed for the 15 acres being sold back were all signed on the same day by the same people. One with the 5 acre, and they weren't recorded till after the house was built. So you had the 20-acre sale signed on the same day as the 5 and 15-acre sale. 20-acre sale was recorded. They got their deed. Once the house was built, the other 2 were recorded. But so yes, there are, like I said, this happened several times. It does not happen anymore. I don't want to get into the details of it as to who did it and where they're at this point in time. But if you want the property history, it is on page 2 of the staff report. It's fairly thorough. It has this map on here. It gets complicated, as you can see, and I think they tried to hide some of the division by making it so complicated. And there has been a period of time where we did not have a plat officer on staff to help catch this kind of thing. So.
And the present owners are not the original.
No.
They were unaware.
No, in fact, the Romero property came to our attention in 2007 when the original owner, Miss Malum, came in to get a permit for a fence, and we denied her. Now, she claimed no knowledge of it and that her deceased husband had handled all of that, which was plausible, but we still denied the permit because it wasn't right. She chose not to do anything to correct it.
Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What have our votes been in the past to
All
on
of
these
them,
situations? Have they
all
been
of them
approved?
have been approved because, frankly, there's not much else you can do. And in this instance, each one of them would have to make them legal as of right now, would have to buy enough land around them to make them 20 acres again, and that's just not possible.
Right, okay.
So your choice is to leave these homes out there uneligible for permits until they deteriorate and fall down, and then you'll have a vacant lot sitting there,
Okay.
or approve the rezoning.
That was going to be my second question. Then they can't do anything to improve their property, so
That is correct.
the neighbors wouldn't like
Even
that
something
either,
as simple
so
as a fence.
we're at a rock and a hard place.
This
so.
was a moment in time where we were taken advantage of, and we caught it, and no more. So that's where we stand. And so we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Under transportation, rural transit update.
Good morning, everyone. I'll keep this real short. One of the things we wanted to start doing was provide at least quarterly updates on our rural transit operations. And so I wanted to give you an update for first quarter of the fiscal year. So from July 1st through September 30th, we had a total number of trips of 9,672, and 4,847 of those were on our Moments commuter route, so it's just right around half. We had 7 trip denials, which those can come from a various places, such as we weren't able to accommodate a trip necessarily in the time frame that a rider has requested, or in some instances our buses are just too full and we can't necessarily accommodate those riders. So compared to last year's first quarter, we were up about 23%. Same thing with the deviated fixed route. Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Vickery.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on the committee, but Jeff, go over those numbers again. I need to write those down for that Moments area.
Yeah, the total number of trips for the quarter was 9,672. And on the Moments commuter route, there were 4,847.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. Under planning, solar energy development information report.
In your packet is a report written by Mr. Blair from the Supervisor Assessment's Office and myself. We were asked by Chairman Wheeler to put together a report of what we know about solar farms. And I have boiled this down into a PowerPoint that we're going to go through, but you do have the full report that you can take with you and read at your leisure. It's exciting stuff. Okay. All right, so solar farm development. First question is, why now? Why all of a sudden are we getting inundated with calls and requests for information about solar farms? That leads back to the Future Energy Jobs Act, which was enacted by the legislature December of 2016 and went into effect June 1st of 2017. I'm just going to touch on that a little bit. It's over 500 pages and covers all different types of energy. But suffice to say is that it requires the state to expand its renewable portfolio by 3,000 megawatts of new solar development and 1,300 megawatts of new wind development by 2030. Those do sound like some big numbers, but if you really break it down statewide, that's about between 8,000 and 15,000 acres, 12 to 23 square miles. And if you break it down by the 102 counties, it's really only about 200 acres per county. Now, obviously, there's going to be some counties that don't get it and some that get more. But if you broke it down by the numbers, that's what it is. So we're not really talking about huge impacts statewide. And they're going to do this by what they call is SRECs, or solar energy tax credits. And those credits are divided into 4 different types. The utility scale solar farms, those are the big ones. About 40% of those credits are going to go to those. 50% of the credits are going to go to community solar farms. Those are smaller 20, 30 acre size farms. 2% to brownfields. That would be landfills, old industrial sites. And 8% is light renewable program, which would be private individual installations, such as rooftop installations. Anything to add, Eric?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, he's on.
So, about a year ago, we really knew nothing about the Future Energy Jobs Act, or that they even passed it, and we started getting a lot of calls from various companies wanting to do solar farms in Kankakee County. It's when we realized it's not in our ordinance, so we did write an ordinance to allow them, and it was adopted by the county board in May of 2017. At that time, as we were doing our research, we learned that there was only one operating solar farm in Illinois. It's located in LaSalle County, northeast of Streator. It's a 160-acre facility, 20 megawatts, and it's a photovoltaic style system. There's some pictures of it right there of what it looks like. So we didn't have a lot to go on. In fact, the LaSalle County zoning ordinance didn't have much in it either. There was really no regulations, just simply one line that says solar farms are permitted in our agricultural district. Nothing to go along with that. No fencing requirements, setback requirements.
I'd like, as we agreed, if you have questions as we're going through this, please, this is for the committee members, please ask.
That would be best. Yeah.
Okay, and instead of going back.
It may be later in the presentation, but why are we getting all of these calls? Is there any particular reason why we're getting more calls than another area might not?
Well, it's been my understanding that other counties are getting probably just as many as we are. Okay. There are some that are not. One thing that the solar farms do need is the proper electrical grid infrastructure in place. If property is near a major transmission line, especially a PJM line, or an existing substation, it saves the solar farm company a lot of money. And so those are very attractive to them.
Okay.
The farther they are away, the more money it costs for them to get their power to the grid, and therefore less competitive.
If I could interject for just a second, talking with the Illinois Farm Bureau, they informed me that about 70 counties in the state have been contacted about solar energy. So we're not alone in this. As Delbert stated, I think it's close to 3/4 of the counties in the state have at least been approached in some way about solar energy.
Some more than others. I think our proximity to the Braidwood power plant and the transmission lines going to it does have an effect on that.
Del, with the LaSalle County farm there, have there been issues that have come up as that has been running?
Not that I am aware of. Eric has actually talked to the assessor over there on a regular basis, so he might be able to touch on that more than I could. I do have to say that it is not necessarily, I've been over there to see it, it's not necessarily a model of how they should be maintained. The grass is a little taller than it should be. There's weeds growing up through the fence some, so it may not necessarily be a model for that, but I'm not aware of any issues.
Yeah, I've broached that subject with the commercial appraiser there in LaSalle County, and basically asked them if they had any issues. That was constructed in 2012. It's been operational for 5 years now. He reported nothing to me as far as any concerns from any impact, including taxation, but not limited to taxation either. No objection to the assessed value either at this time. But as far as what we're speaking about now, I'm not aware of any issues there in LaSalle County.
No controversial issues?
No.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So I would encourage you, if you get a chance, go over there and take a look at it. The map on the left shows you where it's located. Just take Illinois Route 17 to 18 and turn north on 21st Road. It's about 2 miles up on the right. I would encourage you to do that. Give you a really good idea of the uses in the area, noises, types of effect that it has. There's also another one on the right there. It's not in our state, but it's in close proximity. If you go out Route 114, where it turns into Route 10 in Indiana, and cross over Route 41, there's a very small one on your right. Might also give you an idea of what one would look like. So those are two in close driving distance to us.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that it?
Oh, no. We're on slide 3 of about slide 30, so we're going to keep going here. Okay. There are some other ones in the state that are they're under construction at this time. It's possible they could be built by now. It's been 2 or 3 months since I've made these slides. There's one in Shelby County. It's about I think it's about a 10-acre, 15-acre site, or 20-acre site. There's another one in Mason County. Those are both being constructed by the same company. I think it's Prairie Power. Yeah.
Is that stone underneath there?
I believe that that is just raw dirt that hasn't been planted yet. It's still in the construction phase. But you can look at some of these pictures and kind of see what may be under them.
Right.
I know the Grand Ridge Farm is grass, and that's why I said it's grass is a little taller than you probably like. Not much more than any prairie or pasture, but it's a little. When I was over there, it looked like they had just mowed it, and they didn't necessarily mow under the solar panels. So you had these rows of nicely mowed grass, and then you had the taller grass. Might not be as well maintained as you might like.
Mr. Washington.
Okay.
Has there been an expression of any need for reconstruction of the roads entering into the site as it was with the?
No, but we'll get to that when I get to the zoning section.
Okay.
If you want to hold off, I might be able to answer that right there. But okay. And since then, there have been a few additional. These are more private. U of I is building one in Champaign. I believe it may be constructed because somebody did tell me you can drive by and see it now. West Pullman Farm up in Chicago is being built. These are not commercial farms, though. They're for a specific purpose. Types of solar technology. It really breaks down to two different types. Photovoltaic, which are the panels that you've seen in these pictures, and solar thermal, which uses a parabolic mirror that directs the rays of the sun to a central location that heats a fluid, which is converted to energy. I've been told by many people that that is only used in a desert environment and would not be used under any circumstances in Illinois. So we're really talking about the photovoltaic type. Components of a solar farm. There's a little schematic up here that kind of explains what's involved. The blue boxes are the solar arrays. Those are the rows of panels. Depending on the size, it depends on the number of panels, but there are solar panels. Number two is an inverter that collects all the electricity and converts it from AC to DC or DC to AC? DC to AC, yeah. Yes. I always confuse those two. Okay. Number of inverters on the site also is dependent on the size of the site and the number of solar panels. Then there's a transformer, usually, sometimes multiples. Electrical wiring and data cabling, usually underground, and in fact our ordinance requires it to be underground unless conditions do not allow it to be underground, and then it's up to the planning director to determine that. A power plant controller, that's what controls everything, monitors how much electricity is being produced and what's happening with it. Generally there may be a control center, but because of communications, does not necessarily have to be on site, and I have not heard of anybody proposing one yet. It could be very well anywhere because they just have to, some human somewhere has to monitor the whole system. And then of course there are transmission lines depending on what size scale one you're looking at, and that gets it back to the grid or a substation. The utility grade ones have to be hooked up to a substation, either an existing one or they have to build their own. The community residential ones just need a 3-phase line. So they're a little more flexible on where they can be. And generally speaking, there's a security fence, some warning signage, and some type of access roads on site. Okay. There's some pictures of what that sort of thing looks like. The solar arrays are on the left. The cabling underneath the solar arrays, which is would be about the only above ground cabling, but it would be attached to the back side, is on the right. There's a picture of a typical inverter and a transformer. Generally speaking, the only concrete used on site is under those transformers and inverters. So it's about an 8-foot by 10-foot pad or something of that size in a few locations on site. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, these are stationary. They do not move now. Is that correct?
Well, there are models that move and tilt with the sun. I have been told that those are not needed in Illinois and would not be used here. that these would be permanently fixed.
Is that something that comes in with the application that we could
Yes, that would
require,
be
or?
part of the design.
Okay.
And of course would be part of the plans that would be submitted.
Okay.
Okay, so I can't say that we won't get an application that has ones that move, but I've been told by people in the industry that that is not what they'd be using in Illinois. We have a fairly constant sunlight from the right angles, and that's what it is, that it moves with the angle of the sun, and they do not need that here, so.
Okay.
How are they anchored to the ground?
Well, we're gonna get to that,
okay.
I think next, actually. Well, let's finish this out. There's what a power plant controller looks like. Typical control center, like I said, that could very well be in New York or LA for, you know, they just have to have a internet cable to monitor that controls, or power plant controller, and transmission lines in a substation. Foundations. From what I can gather, there's 3 basic types. One on the left, that picture down there, is with concrete for the post. Generally, these are a tubular steel type of construction. Sometimes they do use some wood at the top for attaching the panels. Middle one is without concrete, and over on the right, and this is only used when they can't get into the ground. I don't believe anybody's going to be using that in Illinois. It is a possibility. They just use really large weights at the bottom of them. I have seen some with like a concrete block that it's attached to. Again, that's going to be on a project by project basis. We don't know. Generally, the people I've talked to, they only use concrete if the soil type warrants it. And I have not heard of any of them anticipating the need to use concrete. So these are just
They don't anticipate using
anticipate. Yes, they don't anticipate using concrete.
Then is it anchored with? I mean, what keeps them?
It's driven into the ground. Those pipes are driven into the ground. Think about 6 feet or something.
6
like
feet.
that.
Okay,
maybe
that's,
8.
That's what I'm wondering for.
Again, all of that engineering and design is on a case-by-case basis, a site-by-site basis, and will be reviewed by my office as well as the Zoning Board of Appeals and this committee.
Well, if it's driven into the ground, it's easier to disassemble.
The site disturbance is pretty minimal, yes, in most cases. And I always have to qualify it with that, in most cases, okay? You know, if you get some soils that can't support those posts, they may use concrete.
If the rock is high?
The rock is high, they might propose those weighted systems.
Okay.
I do have a time-lapse video if you want to indulge me, and if it works from YouTube. It's a 3-minute video of one being constructed in England from start to finish. This one does use concrete, okay? I will let you know that, but let's see if we can actually get this to work. Actually, no, but well, maybe. I mean, you have to look at it very quick. You know what? That doesn't look like. Let's see if I can get to it this way first. Let's see. Amazingly, it did work in my. Oh, there's where the problem is. Enable content, maybe. Okay. Watch on YouTube. It'll take 10 minutes to bring the video up, I guess, but really. I believe the caption on the video said that this was about a 3-month or 4-month period, start to finish.
Yeah, I don't see concrete. They don't lift much there, do they?
No.
There's the concrete.
That gives you an idea of the construction process on one of these. You can certainly find hundreds of videos out there of various other solar farms being constructed.
Is there any concerns of sheeting of rainwater? In other words, rainwater coming off the land faster than if it were not there?
I have not heard of any. Again, that would be part of the design. It is possible a retention pond of some sort might be needed depending on the site.
Okay.
And its configuration. Okay. Zoning, as I said before, the county board approved the ordinance back in May of this year for zoning. Prior to that, we did not have an ordinance that addressed solar farms. In fact, pretty much nobody in the state did either, because that's the first thing when you're drafting a new ordinance is to look and see who's already done it before. No sense putting yourself through all of that if you can borrow it from somebody else. Unfortunately, we really didn't find too much. So our ordinance is modeled after several ordinances from North Carolina. They've had solar farms down there for quite a while. Our wind ordinance and what we could find in Illinois. Just a little side note, our ordinance is really, I'm sending that out about 5 times a week, and it's probably going to be used as the model ordinance for most counties throughout the state. Currently, Kankakee, Livingston, and LaSalle now have ordinances. As I said, though, LaSalle's doesn't have much in it, and Livingston pretty much adopted ours. What does our ordinance say about these? They are only permitted in the A1 agricultural district and only through the issuance of a special use permit approved by the county board. That means the county board gets to look at every one of them and determine whether it's appropriate in that location and if there are any issues. Because it's a special use permit, the board can put conditions on each one to mitigate whatever concerns or issues that might come up, and that's on a case-by-case basis. Minimum lot size is 5 acres, so that accommodate the smaller ones, but there is no maximum lot size. Maximum height is 30 feet, but I'm understanding that in general they're between about 8 and 14 feet tall, the arrays. Setbacks, we require 100 feet from the front or the road and a setback of 50 feet from all other property lines, unless the adjoining property is zoned for residential use or has a home on it, in which case that is also a 100-foot setback. We require an 8-foot security fence around the perimeter. Okay, and at the discretion of the Zoning Board of Appeals or the County Board, and that would be determined on a case-by-case basis, screening such as tree plantings or other construction of berms or other aesthetic qualities could be required. But like I said, that would be on a case-by-case basis.
Question, have there, these other farms, have they done those types of things with a berm or with trees or?
If you look at videos out there, yes, there's,
okay.
You can see them with both. One I have talked to that has a proposal here. They don't want to put it around the entire site, but they are offering to put it anywhere there are homes if the residents would like to have trees there. And we do require a Knox box on the entrances so emergency personnel can get there at any time and go into the facility if needed. Lighting. Solar farms don't operate at night, so there is very little lighting required for these. And noise, just like all uses, is limited to, in our ordinance, is limited to 50 decibels as measured at the property line. And signage, they're limited to only signage for safety and contact purposes.
Number 5. Okay.
Go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
So the first one you say solar farms are only permitted in A1 agricultural districts. Does that mean they're only allowed in those districts or only in those districts with the special permit? So the question is,
first,
for like if somebody want to put them on top of on roofs or over parking lots, I wouldn't expect those to be A1 zoned.
That's correct.
So if they're not an A1, is there allowance for that, or?
Try to explain that. Solar farms themselves, you have to be zoned A1 first, and then you have to get special permission through the special use permit from the county board. A private installation is already allowed. If you want to put solar panels on your home,
okay,
you can do that now. If you own a business and want to put it on top of your business, you can do that now. We're not talking about solar installations for private use.
Okay.
We're talking about solar farms. So if you have a parking lot, we don't have a lot of parking lots under the county's jurisdiction. That's more of an urban thing. But I would believe, depending on the plans and what they're wanting to do, would probably fall under the private use.
We do have brownfields, though.
That we do. Mm-hmm. And that could fall under the solar farm portion of the ordinance. We do have a farmer out in Pembroke Township that put in his own mini solar farm, solar panels to power his farm. That is allowable now without the special use permit.
Is lightning an issue? Have they addressed that at all?
No, it's not.
They have not said that it is. No,
it's not.
Not tall enough.
They haven't. Yeah, that they have not said. It seems like the biggest hazard to the solar farms themselves is hail. So the approval process, keep in mind, no farm is permitted by right. All of them must go before the county board for your approval. Until they get that approval, it is not a project. Okay? And the process is the same just for like it is for any other special use permit. It goes to ZBA for a hearing. That's where the public and anyone who wants to speak for it or against it, present testimony, information, that's where that occurs. Okay? Then it goes to this committee. Then it goes to the county board for final approval. At any point during there, any one of those groups can put conditions on it. So if there is something that can be done to take care of somebody's concern, you can make that a condition and a requirement. Okay? Keep in mind that hearing process, and I don't know how much Graham's going to talk about it when he gets to his section, when you're making your decisions on zoning cases, they must be made based on the testimony at the hearing, not outside information. Taxation and additional financial benefits. We were asked to talk about this. I have to commend Eric for the work he's done here. I went to him almost a year ago when I started getting these calls and questions started coming up. How are these things going to be assessed? What type of taxes might we see off of them? I didn't have an answer, so I went to the resident expert to find that answer. He also didn't have an answer. But he worked very hard to try to find an answer and realized that he may not have one, and formed a committee with assessors throughout the state, and they've been working very hard to create new legislation that would address that, and I'm going to let him take care of that.
All right, thanks, Delbert. Along those lines with the introduction there from Delbert, I
A little closer, Eric.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I did recognize that there was no statute in the property tax code that would directly affect or guide how we would value a solar project for taxation, for assessment purposes. Given that fact and how specialized this type of project is, I felt it was appropriate to go to my association and find out if there was any interest in forming a subcommittee so that we could address the issue of assessing these projects uniformly throughout the state. At that time, in May of this year, we did form that subcommittee. We had a meeting here in Kankakee in June, and at that meeting we decided that it was probably the best course of action to pursue legislation that's very similar to that of the wind energy projects. That particular statute lays out an actual formula, which really makes it the process pretty easy to place that value on the tax rolls without really jeopardizing any of that abstract value. So it's advantageous for us to try to pursue that, and that's what we're trying to do. We're still in the process of crafting all of that language, although we do have a draft in place, and we actually have a formula that we have grounded in the reality of what it actually costs to build these types of projects, and the cost of what is really should be considered the real estate component, because there are some things that are personal property to these projects as well, so we need to recognize that. Along with that, I did prepare in that report, page 6, if you would turn to that, please. In the middle of that page, there is a bolded box that Delbert.
Did you want me to switch it?
Yeah, go ahead, please. There's a bolded box that actually you can read what's on the screen there. It's going to be hard to see on the screen. That's why we put it on the page. So I'll go through that a little bit. But before I really get started on that, I want to disclaim it a little bit, because it is speculative for me to sit up here and try to tell you what the assessment will be if we're trying to get legislation passed. And we all know that as it makes its way through the House and Senate, those value components could likely change. So what I'm giving you now is an estimate based on the formula as it sits today. But if we're successful and the governor does sign it in August, let's say, of 2018, those value components may be very different from what I'm discussing today. So I just want to make sure that that's abundantly clear. What I did for this example was I tried to give an idea of what the taxation would look like for a 10 megawatt project. Each megawatt, as I'm told by industry, takes about at least 5 to 6 acres per megawatt to construct. So in this example, what I did was I randomly selected in the unincorporated area of the county a parcel that is 80 acres in total. For the 10 megawatt project, I allotted 60 acres for the project and left 20 acres left over, probably left as farmland. That's what happened really in the LaSalle project as well. They have a 20 megawatt project. It's 160 acres total. 140 is taken up for the solar project, and 20 acres is left over for the farm. So it's somewhat similar in the way that it's laid out there in LaSalle County. Get to that part of what I did there so I can talk to you about the example. So what I came up with was the idea that if I were to assess a 10 megawatt project on 60 acres of commercial ground at that point, because it would no longer likely qualify for the preferential farmland assessment, I came to an estimate of an estimate of assessed value at almost $2.6 million for the 10 megawatt project. That would include the land value. So if you took the $2,000,000 $599,000 assessed value that I came up with, times the representative tax rate of 7.8997% in that unincorporated, for that unincorporated parcel, I came up with an estimate of tax at roughly $205,500. Again, those value components could easily change and really affect the outcome of the taxation at that point.
What would the original tax bill of the farmland for this hypothetical parcel be?
Good point. The 80-acre parcel that I selected currently has a tax bill of $775. So we're looking at a huge difference, an increase of about $204,700 of tax revenue. Again, this is on 10 megawatts, so we could get 1 megawatt projects. We could get something that's larger than 10. I just chose 10 as one metric.
The largest proposal I've seen so far is 70 megawatts.
Yeah, it's possible to get up to a really big project, but we could also see something very small too.
Oh, Mr. Wheeler.
That 7.8997%, is that a combined tax rate of all taxing districts that are over that parcel?
That's correct.
And of that, like, how much of that is the county, and how much of it? I mean, just not to be quoted, just a 10%,
It's
20%.
about 15%, because the county rate is about 1.13.
So mostly the township and the school districts are taking the lion's share of that.
I would say, yeah, the education portion of the bill is going to take up probably 2/3 of that. The county itself, as a taxing body, sees about maybe 1/7 to 1/8 of it. So 12 to 15%, let's say.
Okay, thank you.
Would probably be a good estimate. So I don't know if anyone has any questions regarding the taxation information that I just presented. If you do, please, at this time, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Do you have any idea when the legislation might be approved?
Yeah, I wish I knew. I think the best case scenario would be summer of 2018. If we're really lucky, like I said, the governor, as I'm told, typically would sign legislation in about August. We will have something ready for the upcoming 2018 congressional session, which I think probably kicks off. There are others in the room here that know this better than I do, but sometime in the early part of 2018 that would start. So we want to make sure that we have something ready at that time. And like I said, if it were to go smoothly, we could see something by summer of 2018. The other point that I want to make real quick too, as I've talked with some industry reps, they've indicated to me that with the decline of cost of certain components of the project, likely to be the technology, it could be that they wait until somewhere in 2019 or 2020 to actually construct these projects, because they will realize some cost savings if they do that. So while I'm not saying that we won't get a project in 2018, many of these companies are looking at the future, 2019 and 2020, to go online, because they may save some money by doing that instead of moving forward now. But it should be recognized that we should be ready as soon as possible, because obviously in the LaSalle County instance, they put it up in 2012 without any renewable energy credits. So it could happen sooner than later. Any question?
Mr. Wheeler.
I have a lot. I'm sorry, I keep coming up with things. Typically, as you're researching other projects, and this might be more for Dell, have an EIS been performed, some type of environmental impact study? Is there data to rely on? Maybe Mr. Ritter, being an engineer, he's seen some of that stuff in the past. I don't know, but I'm just wondering some of the concerns about, we say runoff and pesticides and other things. Is that any more than what are being sprayed right now on crops? I guess that I'm wondering if that data exists, or if it will come out in testimony during the process.
Combination of both.
Okay.
There are reports out there. I did just a few days ago. I found a report from the EPA on a site, I want to say it was either New Jersey or North Carolina, that came out favorable and showed that there were no hazardous effects from the solar farm. And of course, a lot of that will come out at the hearings. They do have to do, they have to give us environmental reports on their project as part of the special use permit process.
Okay. And one other thing was that fencing on the setback issue. There's the setback of 100 feet if it's a
That
property.
is from the facility, yes.
But then the fence comes then, and then the facility. It's not 100 feet and then
No, the fence could be on the perimeter of the property.
Okay.
Just like any fence can be now.
Then 100 feet, and
But
then
the solar
back,
panels
right.
must be 100 feet back.
Okay.
Yes, or any other equipment. So,
I see. Okay.
the only part that's not required to be set back is the fence.
Got it.
I have one other comment about the taxation that just occurred to me. I wanted to make it clear, if we do not get a legislative initiative passed through the House and Senate, there is another way to go about it, and that is the way that LaSalle County did it. It refers back to 9-145 of the Property Tax Code, which you would then likely use an itemized cost list to figure out what cost is attributable to the real estate and assess it that way in absence of a formula or something like that. So either way, I would like to say that I believe that we are well positioned once, if something does get through the zoning phase and is approved for construction, I believe that we are well positioned to be able to put it on the tax roll, at the end of that cycle. So.
Okay. All right. Mr. Stoffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Typically, because I'm from the ag community and the ag background, I'm kind of against these things, and I was against actually when Sears wanted to build their warehouse, but to take that land out of production. But there was probably 1,000 jobs created from it. Are there any jobs created from something like this once it's done? Doesn't look like
Once
there's
it's
any.
done?
Yeah, once
No,
it's done,
very,
there's
very few.
so
Construction jobs, yes. Maintenance jobs, somebody comes around a couple times a year and mows it. A repairman comes out if something goes wrong.
Yeah, but to build it, there's jobs, but after that, there's no jobs developed from it, so that just seems a minus to me right away.
Not a huge amount of permanent jobs. I do not have any figures or estimates on per megawatt how many that might be, but it's a low number.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
There are some other additional financial benefits or fees. Obviously, there's a special use permit fee for that application. There's a building permit fee. And depending on the project and its needs, there could be other fees like stormwater permits, floodplain permits, etc. Impacts. And this is impacts as we know them, and I did not go into detail on this slide. It is in your report in a little more detail. Noise. My understanding, and of course, I'm usually talking about after construction. During construction, you have your typical noises and things like that you would have during the construction process. But after construction, there is virtually no noise. The only noise generated by a solar farm, my understanding, is a very low hum from the inverters, and that's why they put them towards the center of the site, so that what I've been told is 50 feet away from that inverter, you would not hear anything. So between our setbacks and their location on the site, it should not impact anyone. Interference in electromagnetic fields, and trust me, I am no expert on any of this. But the reports I read is that they are similar to household appliances and they pose no health risk to neighboring residents. Water use on the property, very little. Occasionally, if dust becomes a concern, somebody will go out there and power wash the panels. This may occur a few times a year. It may not occur at all. That's on an as needed basis. Odors. There are no odors from a solar farm. Glare, very little if any. Keep in mind that these panels are designed to absorb light. Yes. They are not designed to reflect light, and therefore can't say that there wouldn't be some glare of some sort from the racking systems or something like that, but I have seen where it looks like they may be painting them with some type of black paint or something now that would reduce even that. Aesthetics, that comes down to a personal opinion. For every person you find that thinks they're ugly and doesn't like them, you can probably find somebody that says, oh, that's cool and modern. That's really a personal opinion. Property values. There are no studies available for solar farms that we could find, but we did find plenty of them for wind farms, and so if you consider that they're both power facilities, there are several differences, but those reports show that there was no change, or in most cases a positive change, to property values from before construction and after construction. And I know Eric did look into that a little bit, so do you have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the longest standing solar project in the state is again LaSalle County from 2012. It's too new to really know for sure the impact that a solar project may have on surrounding real estate values. But as Del pointed out, we did find some studies on wind energy projects throughout the country, which would tell you that any effect on the property values, surrounding property values, is negligible at most. It really doesn't provide any substantial impact to the value of the surrounding real estate. So at this time, I would expect, you know, they are similar in terms of use. So I would assume it has a similar non-impact of value, but only time will tell, and we probably need at least a decade to know.
There is a link to one of those reports in your packet. Drainage. Because there's very little site disturbance, there should be little or no impact to drainage. Our ordinance does require the developer to give us a location map of drain tiles, and of course they would have to repair any of them that they did damage. Roadways. Unlike the wind farms, they do not have to make major modification to the roadways. They're not bringing in 120-foot long posts and fins. It's my understanding everything for a solar farm would come in on a normal semi-truck, and not nearly as many truckloads as a wind farm would have. Keep in mind, a wind farm had 50 truckloads of concrete for each foundation. Wow. So the impact is very low to the roadways, but because we did not know when we were writing the ordinance exactly how it might affect the roadways, we did require the developer to have a road use agreement with the appropriate road authority prior to approval. So they will need to talk to their road commissioners and work out some type of an agreement with them. And if that road, you know, it's really up to the road commissioner on what he thinks his roads are going to need and what kind of repairs it may need after the fact. Did that answer your question, Mr. Washington? Yes. Since we don't know exactly where they might be, some of them could be on a gravel road for all we know. That's why we said you need to talk to the road authority and make sure everything's okay with them. What's next? Currently, and as of yesterday, we can add another one to this. There are 15 proposed solar farm projects in Kankakee County from 9 different companies in various areas of the county. Now, by proposed, I mean they've talked to us about it, and we've gotten far enough for them to give me some type of location. I don't necessarily know how many megawatts or how much of a site might be used or exactly the number of acres, but I have at least a general location on it. 3 of those 15, well, actually now 4 of those 15 are within municipalities. They range from about 2 megawatts to 70 megawatts, and from about 20 acres to, we can change that to 600 acres. There are also 3 new possible wind farms as well. Just wanted to throw that in there because that seemed important too, even though it has nothing to do with solar. The Grant Park one, as you know, and there are 2 companies looking to the western part of the county for wind farms. And that's where I ended, yes.
Okay, Mr. Kinzinger.
I'm presently unfamiliar with solar farms. With a height of 8 to 14 feet, what's the status of the ground below? I heard you state that it grows grass and weeds very well. Is it tillable, farmable? Can you plant flowers under there?
Well, if we can go back to some of these photos, I'll kind of show you that.
I would think if it's shaded, it wouldn't be growing weeds.
Some flowers don't like sun. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Typical height off the ground is probably about 2 or 3 feet, so.
Oh, the backside is.
Yes,
right.
Oh, okay.
Tilted side, okay. So generally speaking, they leave them in some type of ground cover that is easily maintained and doesn't grow too high. And I've heard various ideas that some companies allow people to raise goats on them, beekeeping and various other things that.
That's what I was asking.
So that they can still get some kind of use out of the ground with the solar farm. Who knows? But generally, they are grassed. The companies I have talked to, they don't even want to build access roads throughout the site more than they have to. They'll drive their trucks right on the grass. They just, they improve the entrance so they don't get hung up there. But so like I said, there's very little. They're not going to pave the entire site. I can't say that they won't. There may be some company that wants to do that. I don't know, but I have not seen a proposal like that at all. No, there's a huge cost involved.
You got that right.
And a huge cost involved.
That'd be a river.
The less they can do to the site, the better off they are, and the cheaper it is for them. So,
any other questions? Okay, is that it?
That's what I have.
All right.
Certainly take questions.
Mr. Wheeler.
The process, if someone were to do an application, how does that process begin? Do you come to this committee and it becomes public that we have an application, or
I mean, I can, but that's not typically how we do it. Applications are received by the county clerk's office, 2 copies of them. One of them stays with the county clerk as the official copy. The other one comes up to my office. I have 5 days to review it to make sure it's complete. I'm not looking for any specific content, just to make sure that all the requirements are there. Once that occurs, a public hearing date is set. And at that point, that sets into motion all of the notifications. That's when the letters, all adjoining property owners have to be notified by certified mail within 7 days of the hearing. A notice goes in the newspaper 15 days before the hearing. And I believe there are some mailings to the units of government that also occur during that time, such as fire departments, townships, municipalities within 1.5 miles. And generally, this committee doesn't see it or hear about it till after the zoning board hearing. But if you would like me to keep you informed on that, I certainly can. There is nothing wrong with doing that.
It might be helpful. Yeah, I'd like to know that. Yeah, we'd like to know. You know, like you said,
we won't take action, we won't discuss it here, but at least we know things are in motion.
Yeah, and that may play into some of what Graham has to talk about, because we have to be careful with what I tell you. So, but if we have an application, stating we have one where it's at, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
And of course, then we have the public hearing or hearings, depending on how many it takes to get through the information. And as you know, the zoning board will make a recommendation and send it to this committee, and it goes up the ladder from there.
Okay. Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to compliment Delbert and Eric. I think it's one for this report. I think it's another evidence of the quality of people the county has in various positions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is a public report, so if you know of anybody who wants a copy of it, we can certainly get it out to them.
All right. Oh, Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to recommend that we put it on our website so it's readily available.
I could do that. I think I sent that to Kevin for that.
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a note of Eric's example of $200 and some thousand, and if the county gets 15%, it's like 30 grand for that particular scenario. So, just so people know that we're not, the $200,000 looks pretty inviting, but for the county, it's 30 grand, approximately.
Right. Okay, any others?
Well, while it may look good for the school districts, and I'm no expert on that at all, I did hear that the school districts were somewhat disappointed with the money from the wind farms because it didn't really work out the same way. Apparently, the state aid funding that they receive gets lowered as their local tax base goes up. So,
Okay, we're going to move on. Is there any old business? Do you have old business, Mr. Vickery? All right, going on to new business. Presentation of ex parte communication guidelines. You are now.
I am now. Good morning, everybody. So I was asked to come to this committee and explain what ex parte communications is and why it's relevant to what you guys do. Obviously in the context of what Delbert and Eric just were mentioning, but it applies in every case that comes before you when it comes to zoning special permits, variances, anything like that that you guys hear and vote on. So I provided some guidelines for you to look over and just to hold on to so you can know for future. But the first part is, what is an ex parte communication? So when you're going through a case, a zoning case, you take on a role that's quasi-judicial. And what that means is you can only consider things that are being publicly discussed, so evidence and testimony that are part of that public meeting. Anything outside of that public meeting, you can't consider unless it's been rebutted. So, for example, we had some public comments about the solar farms this morning. The letters that the chair received about the solar farm can be discussed in a public meeting, but they have to be able to be rebutted by the applicant who's come forward and requested the variance. Going to the sites, talking with the applicants or the neighbors or anything like that would probably be inappropriate unless those neighbors came to the meeting and discussed their thoughts and feelings publicly as well. So that's kind of the nutshell of what ex parte communications is. That also includes talking with Delbert and his staff. That also includes talking with the ZBA members and how they voted and why they voted the way they did. Again, unless they come to the meeting and discuss it publicly. Obviously, a lot of these applications are public and very contentious. You're probably going to hear about it anyway. So if you do come across someone who has an interest in a zoning case, and they start talking to you about why they don't like it or why they do like it, or what the benefits are, what the costs might be, I would point them in the direction of coming to the meeting and discussing their thoughts openly and publicly in a point where they can be addressed by the other side. A good way to think about it is in criminal cases in our office, right? I can't go after a defendant unless that defendant is in court as well. Same kind of thought process, right? So I've laid out some best practices. I pulled them from other counties, bylaws, rules. I kind of pulled it from a little bit of everywhere, but just to go through them, I might have discussed them a little bit already. You should try to avoid participating in ex parte communications as much as you can. Obviously, that's the ideal. People are going to have their concerns. Obviously, they want to talk to their elected officials. That's going to happen. So if it does happen, make sure you announce it. So when you come to these meetings and have a conversation about it, just, get the chair's attention and bring it to the board's attention that, this person came to me about this concern. Here's how it happened. Here's how I responded. And just have that conversation in public. Don't leave it alone and say, I don't want to talk about it because X, Y, Z. The reason behind this concern is if there's any impropriety in terms of the appearance of bias or concerns about manipulation of the process, that's something they can appeal on, and then we're going to have problems legally. So that's why it's a concern. That's why you need to think about it. And as I already talked about, anything that comes to you outside of a public meeting, you can't use as part of your decision unless it's rebutted publicly. So, that's 5 minutes in a nutshell of what ex parte communications is. I'm happy to answer any questions, but...
Mr. Lear.
Your definition says communications regarding any pending appeal before the PZA. What happens about communications before formal appeals, before formal applications have been filed?
At that point, it's no case. So they can, this was entirely appropriate today in that the people who had public comment can have public comment about a solar farm and what it has in their impact in the community. Once a case is filed, some of the comments today, not saying all of them, may or may not have been inappropriate. That's obviously a case by case. But when a case is not pending, there's nothing for you to consider. There's nothing before this board.
Mr. Wheeler.
To wrap that up, that was going to be my question, but if there is, say, a public meeting describing a potential project filing,
that's where the exception
we're in a gray
to it,
area
yes,
right now, because
right.
there's nothing more that I'd love to do is to take Judge Wenzelman up to go out there and take a look at the area.
Right.
But since
Right.
it was a public meeting, are we into ex parte communication area?
I should have clarified that. Thank you for asking the question. Yes, because it's being addressed publicly in terms of the solar farm project in Bondfield, that would be ex parte communication because it's part of a public process at this point. We now know it's likely going to come before this committee. We know it's becoming before the ZBA likely, so that would qualify. Sorry to muddle the waters there.
No, that's okay. That's why I want to make sure, because we.
But nothing's been filed. You're telling me that these individuals can't talk to us at the current time? They can't
I'm not-
come out to our premises? Go ahead, you can wrap me. I just find that to be astounding, that you're basically saying that the representatives of the people in this community cannot have a discussion with people in their community about an issue as major as this. That at this point in time, you're saying just because somebody draws something on the wall, therefore it is a project, and therefore the local representatives cannot talk to the general public about that.
Would you like me to address Judge Wendelman's concerns?
And I apologize to interject this way, but this is important to us.
I think I can find you in contempt and have you report to the sheriff. This is great.
You're having too much fun with this, aren't you?
Wait a minute. We got Mr. Vickery here.
Thank you. Many of us went through this in the waste management hearings.
Yes.
And so we understand, to a degree, ex parte. And unfortunately, Judge Wenzelman, I think you're in conflict, okay, with ex parte, because we were told by the state's attorney.
Microphone.
Microphone, Jim.
By the state's attorney that we could not communicate with our constituents. That when constituents called us.
Apart from a hearing.
Apart from a hearing.
Public hearing, yeah. But as a phone call, we had to say no. And that was our directions from the state's attorney.
And I stand by that information. There's nothing.
The question is, there is nothing pending before anybody at the current time.
That's right. So
So I don't know why this body, any member of this body, cannot go out and talk to any resident in this county and have a discussion about something as major of a change that could be occurring as this. And I'm sorry, I respectfully disagree.
It's after the application.
You tell me if you want me to respond to Judge Wendelman's concerns or not.
please respond. And
Okay.
Please respond.
I want to see if how he rules on you.
I haven't had that privilege, so.
I'm supposed to be out of this business.
The distinction I believe in this case is you're coming towards this committee and voicing your concerns about a specific project that is very likely to be part of this process regarding getting a special use permit and be part of the community. So my opinion, based on what I understand, is that yes, it's not a pending case, but it is likely to be a pending case, and your concerns are specifically about one individual case. If you have concerns regarding solar farms generally speaking in the county, or what the pros and cons about solar panels are, I don't see any problem with approaching your elected officials and having that conversation, generally speaking. But my understanding is the public comments today were regarding a specific application likely coming before this board. That would be my take on the matter.
I'd rule that was correct. Mr. Ritter.
Okay, so some of this is going on in my district, and so I'm getting communication. I mean, there's nothing wrong with me reading the communication from them. I just don't need to respond to that or engage them. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So you can read it, you can analyze it. I would err on the side of publicly addressing anything that doesn't come out
It's just the
publicly
public
in a meeting.
it's addressing it. Yeah.
But in terms of responding to that communication, I would either not respond, or my response would be, feel free to come to the public meeting on X date in front of ZBA or this committee or the county board or whatever the case may be.
Okay. Mr. McConnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seemed to me when, and I agree with Mr. Vickery, when the landfill came up, walking my district, I knocked on over 300 doors or 3,000 doors and probably got 2,999 comments about the landfill. So I'm supposed to go to them and say, I can't talk to you about that? And that application was coming up? It makes no sense. How are we going to respond to our people if we don't communicate with them?
Well, you can still say, I appreciate your input, want to hear it.
Right.
You just can't respond.
You can't.
You just got to say to them, too bad.
You can't
Go to
enter,
a meeting, I can't talk to you.
you can't enter into a discussion about it and have it influence you.
Well, I
You wear-
apologize,
Till you
but I
hear it.
entered into a discussion.
You wear a
Is
different
the judge
hat.
going to come and arrest me?
I don't think that's in the judge's purview.
I don't think the judge can.
Maybe Graham will. Graham wants to come and arrest me anyway. It just doesn't make sense to me.
that's what
that-
It could have, it, depending on where you come down, it could affect the future of the application, and the people who are proposing it could use that as an appeal that there was discussion taking place. That we had this happen during a landfill.
I believe you did, yeah.
Well,
Just to address that, Pat, the reason is once you're hearing cases, you wear a different hat. Yes, you're an elected official. Yes, you're part of a community, but you're in a quasi-judicial role. So all the evidence and all the testimony presented to you, you have to assess based on what is presented to you in that public meeting. Anything outside of that is what we're talking about. But it has to be presented publicly, and that's just how that works.
Yeah,
Same exact
I wasn't
thing in
in
the
favor
court
of the
case.
land. I wasn't against the landfill, but all the people in my district were, so I voted no. Whether I agreed with it or not, I had to listen to my constituents, and they didn't want it, so I voted no. So I don't understand. It just, I'm not real smart when it comes to this stuff. I just figure I need
You
to
can listen to
communicate.
your constituents. I'm not saying you can't listen to them.
But you can't talk to
But you can engage in a discussion because that influences how you are
It's the
handling
law.
the process, right?
Become a state legislature and change the law, Pat. Okay.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a hard time with this too, but I tried to wrap my mind around it and see when we become, as members of the PZA, and I don't have a vote unless the chairman's not here, but as a member of the PZA, we become in effect almost a judge. And as such,
Not
we
a
have
bad
to
way to
kind
think about it, correct.
we almost have to think, would we want a judge discussing a case that he's hearing with his friends or with interested parties, people that would be affected by the verdict that appears in the case? And obviously, we want a judge to be impartial. I guess we're expected at the PZA and then ultimately full county board members, where I would have a vote, to be impartial and make their decision not based on what's in the newspaper about the case. Hate to pick on the media, but what the facts are that are presented in the court. We've all seen in courts those situations where the decision that comes out of the court we don't understand because we know what was in the media. And so it's a weird thing because we don't think of ourselves as judges. We think of ourselves as elected
And I
officials.
understand that distinction.
Just with all due respect to what Mr. Lurz said, I really have to vote what my constituents say. You know, I look at all the facts, I may agree with them, but they elected me. I have to listen to them and pay attention to what they have to say and weigh that. That's more weight for me on the decision I'm going to make on what they have decided to do.
All right, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate that. But if you do that on this committee in these cases, you have violated the law. That's the problem. That's why I asked Graham to come here and talk to everybody, because these are different situations than voting on a finance matter or a highway approval for paying a bill. This is way different, and it goes both ways. Let's just say that for some reason something is denied, and you have had ex parte communications, and you wanted it to be denied. Whoever was filing it could file that appeal and say you had a predisposed notion or a disposition to vote against this, and it could be overturned.
And just on that
It
note,
works both ways.
just on that note, if you don't disclose ex parte communication while you're talking about it and that event comes up, there's a rebuttable presumption that you were biased against whatever the rule, the other party that lost your appeal, so to speak.
We have to be careful. Mr. Vickery, you were next.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as it was explained to us in the landfill hearings, it was a very narrow interpretation. You were to become a judge. You were to become a judge. Okay. Okay. So you could not be a representative in that issue. You had to be a judge. And that was a very narrow explanation. And we went through appeals.
Yes, you did.
I mean, many of us had to have the appellate process put on us, okay, because of the way the hearings went. So
okay.
The ex parte thing is an important thing, and we have to step up to our responsibility there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you folks remained while we went through this discussion so you understand better our position as committee members and what we have to deal with and make decisions that are in accordance with the law. So I appreciate you staying. Judge, I'd like to call on you, but I'm not allowed to. It's only committee members that can take place after the public comment. So, all right. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Judge always gets the last word. All right. Thinking there's nothing else to discuss, is there a motion to adjourn by Ms. Peters, seconded by Mr. Fairfield? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank all of you for being here. And Merry Christmas.